Well, I think everybody should have a rodeo clown for a friend. I mean, this is a really important thing. Now, I'm not just talking about like the general clown population. I'm not so much in favor of being friends with just, your average ordinary clown. That could be pretty obnoxious and get old. But a rodeo clown, that's something entirely different. A rodeo clown is the type of friend that looks out for you, has your back, is going to take care of you, is going to make sure that you're safe. And I really believe that this type of friend is oftentimes what we call like a best friend. So think about a best friend that you may have ever had. And normally, typically in life, we go through different best friends at different times because there's different seasons and different experiences that we have. And yet it's pretty cool how relationally God allows us to connect with certain people at certain places in our lives that become like our best friends. And sometimes these are actually people that God uses in really cool ways to help us experience his love, to help us learn how to relate better to him and to one another. And he can also use them to help get us out of some tough spots. And so we're in this message series called Rodeo Clowns. Can we get a yeehaw? Yeah! Woo! You guys are getting good at that, all right. And in this message series, we're taking a look at some Old Testament Bible characters that sometimes we may have thought of as secondary characters, but they were really what we're celebrating as rodeo clowns. They came alongside somebody else and really helped that person, and God really used them in incredible ways. And so our memory verse for this series is found in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17. And we'd love you, wherever you are, to please read this out loud. It is wonderful to hear God's words coming out of our mouths. So let's read this together. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. And this is so true. This really aptly describes our rodeo clowns or our best friends. People that oftentimes for us are even closer than a brother or a sister, closer than a sibling, people we can really count on. I remember one of my earliest best friends in middle school. His name was Mark. And Mark was definitely a rodeo clown in my life for a lot of reasons. But Mark and I had a cool relationship because Mark was a church friend. And so I had at that time church friends, and then I had school friends, like the football team and the jocks and that whole crowd that I was running with at school. And then I had the people that, actually liked me a little bit at church. And Mark was one of my church friends, and we had grown up together in church. And we went to the same school. Mark was 1 year older than me. But oftentimes at school, I was hanging out with the other crowd. But this one particular day, I was sitting with Mark at a lunch table, and there was a bully in our school. And you kind of probably remember these types of bullies. I mean, the guy, unfortunately, had tough. Every bully has a story. Let's not forget that. So every bully has a story. There's a backstory here. I mean, the guy was probably like 18 and still in middle school, so that's a problem. And, there's going to be some struggles with that, from that standpoint alone. And so this guy comes by, and he was just kind of always looking for a fight. He was just in that kind of a mood. And we were laughing about something at the table. And he stops, and he looks right at me, and he goes, "What'd you say?" I was like, "I didn't say anything." "No, what'd you say about me?" I'm like, "I didn't say anything about you." He's like, "Why are you laughing at me?" And I'm like, I'm not laughing at you. And this guy's like wanting to fight me. Well, Mark, my church friend, my rodeo clown guy, he looks at the guy and he goes, "You heard what I said." I was like, "You're going to die." This is not smart. In the rodeo clown scene, the bull is present and the bull is angry and enraged. And you're stirring up the bull. It's getting the attention off me, which I'm grateful for. But I'm like, "What are you doing?" And my friend stands up and goes, "You heard me?" And the bully punches him right in the nose. And Mark was a bleeder. And so he starts bleeding immediately. And so he's got blood running down his face. And I'm like, and now the crowd is gathering because there's a fight. And Mark just stands there and there's quiet. And the bully kind of steps back to see what happens next. And Mark points at him and starts laughing. Belly laughing at the guy and doubling over. And now the bully doesn't know what to do. And Mark just keeps laughing. Now everybody's laughing. The school administrators come running over. They assess what's happened. You got one kid punching another kid. The other kid, all he's doing is laughing. So the bully got in-school suspension. And Mark, my friend, nothing happened to him, but it was just kind of like this wild moment. Now, they did meet at the bike racks after school. And surprisingly, Mark was really tough and took care of the bully. But that's a different story for another day. I know. That was my friend. Yeah, on that day, it was like, that was my best friend, Mark and I are buds. We've been friends for a long, long time. And I look back on that, and I know that in my life, I hope that I've been that for other people at times, because I know I've certainly needed it at times in my life. And we're not alone in that. We need those types of friends. And it's no different in the Bible. Like there's this Bible character in the Old Testament. His name is David. We call him King David. And but he had very much a best friend and a person who was very much in the definition of rodeo clown that we're using, a rodeo clown in his life. It was his best friend. His name was Jonathan. Now, Jonathan was the son of King Saul, the first king of the Israelites. And David had been anointed to be Saul's successor, but he was going to have to wait for a period of time. And Saul wasn't really liking this whole dynamic, because now it meant that the lineage, the kingship wasn't going to be passed down to his son Jonathan and stay in the family. And so he viewed David as a threat, but David was very honorable. He was a man after God's own heart. He didn't do anything to harm Saul or take matters into his own hands. And Jonathan, Saul's son, and David were best buds, the type of friends that were closer than any brothers. And so one time, David is aware that Saul is trying to harm him and kill him. And David approaches Jonathan and is like, hey man, I'm going to need some help here. I think your dad's trying to kill me. And in this situation, Jonathan responds with, no way. And he thinks that his dad's not trying to harm David. But as I was looking at this scenario, and what really struck me was this dynamic of choosing a friend over your family. And that's a tough thing to do. So I don't know if you've ever been in that kind of situation where you needed to choose your friend or choose God or choose what was right or choose integrity over your family. And that's oftentimes one of the things that happens in our faith journey and in our relationship with God, where we learn something or discover something. And in order to obey God, it means that we might need to do something that our family wouldn't understand or approve of or like. But the issue here is we don't always know when our families are wrong. We just don't. We don't always know, because we're brought up a certain way, and maybe we want to choose to believe the best, or we have ways of thought that are kind of ingrained in us, and we don't always know. So in this story, we'll discover that. We'll dig into 1 Samuel, an Old Testament book of the Bible, chapter 20, beginning in verse 1. It says, then David fled from Naioth and Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, what have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to kill me? Never, Jonathan replied. You're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without letting me know. Why would he hide this from me? It isn't so. But David took an oath and said, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said to himself, Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there's only one step between me and death. And Jonathan said to David, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. So David said, look, tomorrow is the new moon feast, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until evening of the day after tomorrow. If your father misses me at all, tell him, David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. If he says, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, you can be sure that he is determined to harm me. As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then you kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father? Never, Jonathan said. If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you? And David asked, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? Come, Jonathan said, let's go to the field. So they went there together. And then they're going to make a plan on a signal that Jonathan will give David that involves shooting an arrow to let him know if he's in danger or if he's not. And if he doesn't come, then that'll mean that he's not in danger. But what's happening here is David's like really certain that his life is in danger, and he's absolutely right. And he tells his friend Jonathan, and Jonathan just can't see it. He just can't see that his father is wrong. And he thinks that if his father did intend to do this, he would surely let him know. And David's having this conversation. He's like, listen, you're my friend. And we have this, he calls it a covenant, this promise that we've made to each other to look out for each other. And I'm counting on you here. I want you to find out Find out what's going on, because we don't always know. And sometimes it may be simple things. Sometimes it's bigger things. Like I know I experienced some things where I find out that people are doing wrong about certain things that are just handed down from their family. I mean, there's big things. I mean, it could be, we could be wrong. Like racism is passed down in the family. Or addiction can be handed down in the family, or abuse can be handed down in the family, or just a certain worldview, or being against certain people, or religious ideas that are contrary to the true nature of God can be handed down in a family. And sometimes it's hard to recognize. I mean, even simple things like maybe just saying somebody's name wrong, for instance. Like, if somebody has a name, don't you want to say their name correctly? Yeah. Please say yes. I mean, if somebody has a name, you want to say their name correctly. And so let's say that, but just because your father said that person's name wrong and your grandfather said that person's name wrong, doesn't mean that you should continue saying that name wrong if you know better, if you know what the person's name is. For instance, let's say there was a person, I don't know whose name was, let's go with Reese. Person's name is Reese. R-E-E-S-E. Say that with me. Reese. This is a person's name. Now, if you were to take this person, Reese, and put an apostrophe and an S, donating that this person, Reese, owns something, how would you say this person's name? Reese's, not Reese's. And just because your mom or your dad said it and your grandparents said it, and because your whole region says it the wrong way, doesn't mean you have to keep doing it wrong. It's Reese's. And we eat Reese's Pieces, not Reese's Feces. Okay? You see how, though, we get stubborn in our wrongness. And yeah, it can be on something maybe as silly. But this person, Reese, by the way, was a real person. And they were his peanut butter cups. So if you know better and you know what the name is, then say the right name. And so if you know what's right, then the issue here is to then explore that, because we don't always know when our families are wrong. Jonathan didn't know that his father was wrong. Jonathan didn't know that his father was trying to kill David. So what David says to him is, let's find out. Let's find out. Because ignorance here isn't bliss. Because that's some of the things that we do sometimes is we think, well, maybe not. I'm not sure. I just don't want to know. But if something's wrong, we should probably find out. We should probably explore this. So David had the idea. He's like, this is what I'll do. I'll go hide in this field. You go check it out with your dad, and then let me know if he's threatening me so that I can go away peacefully. So we continue in the story. Jonathan they're going to agree to find out. So in the next verse, verse 12, it says, then Jonathan said to David, I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, that I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed toward you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father intends to harm you, may the Lord deal with Jonathan, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away in peace. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. But show me unfailing kindness like the Lord's kindness as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan and David had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as himself. Here's a real friend. And in this moment, the two are making a promise. That's what this word covenant means. They're making a promise to each other. And they're saying, our lives are tied together. And Jonathan says, I'm going to find out what's right, David. I'm going to seek this out. And so he's going to dig in and do exactly what is planned. And so in our lives, as we examine the things that have been handed down, and sometimes they're through our family, sometimes they're through the cultural context that we live in, sometimes it's things that we've been taught along the way or maybe we've picked up, but we want to find out what's right. What does God say? What does God want? And the thing about this is, as you explore that, one of the things I would encourage you with is sometimes we find out what is right, which means maybe our family was wrong, and then we think we can somehow fix all that wrongness, and so we go and we have a fight with our family. How's that working out for you? I'm just telling you, it's not really the best strategy in the world. You don't have to convince your family in order for you to find out what's right. What you can do is find out what's right and then live accordingly to that and say what's right and live according to that and then let it speak for itself. And there's no need to fight about it or play the blame game or go in and yell at your parents or your siblings because they taught you this wrong thing. If you can have a healthy discussion and it's beneficial, then cool, go for it. But this isn't the time where, this is your opportunity to maybe break a chain that's been handed down and to do what is right. But you got to find out what's right. When you find out what's right, then do what's right. Do the right thing. Just do the right thing. So in this situation, Jonathan's going to do exactly what they plan to do. In the next, we skip down to verse 24. It says, so David hid in the field that they agreed upon. And when the new moon feast came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall, opposite Jonathan, and Abner sat next to Saul, but David's place was empty. Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean. Surely he is unclean. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the meal either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town, and my brother has ordered me to be there. If I found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers. This is why he's not come to the king's table. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman. Ooh. Don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your shame and the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send someone to bring him to me, for he must die. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him and tried to kill him. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David. Good job, Jonathan. Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger on that second day of the feast and did not eat, because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. And then he went out, gave David the signal, and they embraced and sent David on his way. He did the right thing, but it's not easy. Doing the right thing is never easy. In this story, wow, this is pretty crazy. He's like, all right, I'm going to find out, because if my friend's telling me something's off here, maybe something's off here. And he explores this with his father, and what he finds out's pretty bad. His own dad starts, yelling at him and calling his mom names. And then his dad tries to kill him. And so Jonathan reasons, okay, if my dad's trying to kill me, he's probably definitely trying to kill David. And then to do the right thing, but this doing the right thing, even when it's going to be costly, it's this thing called integrity. And integrity is really sweet. Integrity is where we do the right thing, even when we know it's going to cost us something. And in this particular situation, and really every situation, integrity is costly. So with Jonathan, there's a cost involved here in doing the right thing. Part of the cost is pain. There's nothing really like your dad calling you the son of a rebellious and perverse woman. I'm not exactly sure what that term was, but I'm guessing it was probably a common term and just really thrown out there. But there's some relational pain here in this relationship with his father. There's the having to come to grips with, wait, this is really true, and I was blind to it and couldn't see it, and my dad really is trying to kill my best friend. And there's this pain that now could be this loss of respect, which there clearly is. He tells him he's shaming his own family and shaming his mother. And this is one of the things that we encounter a lot in those family dynamics, when there's that controlling element that can be there. To break away from that and do something different means that you're bringing shame on the family, even if what you're doing is right. And it's pretty clear that what you're doing is right. To do the right thing in that moment means to bring shame on the family. I don't care who you are, that hurts. Doesn't matter what your family of origin is like or where you're from. Anytime these things happen, and they really do happen in every single family dynamic to varying levels and degrees, but to do the right thing when your family doesn't agree, it brings pain. And there's loss that is there. It also is costly of position. Saul says to Jonathan, if you protect David, then you'll never become the king. That guy will be the king. You're supposed to be, in Saul's mind, the next king. It's going to be handed down through the family. And so his position of being the king, what Jonathan's doing here in protecting his friend David is he's giving up that position intentionally of being the king. And so when we do this, when we have integrity and we do what's right, there's some positional things that we may lose out on. Some things, and sometimes it's not as material as we might think. Like maybe, you're the favorite in the family. And if being the favorite in the family, trying to protect your position as favorite in the family can cause you to continue to do some things that maybe aren't right or aren't exactly what God would intend or what he would be inviting you into because you don't want to ruffle any feathers or cause any problems. And then if you step outside of that and say, no, I think this is what I'm supposed to do and believe this is what God is calling me to do. I think this is a better way to think and a more loving and gracious and the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control is in this. And so I'm going to live this way. And they're like, okay, you're out. You're not the favorite anymore, or that relationship dynamic changes and you can lose that position. And it's also costly in regard to our purpose. When Jonathan aligned himself with David over his dad, well, now what does this mean? He makes this covenant relationship. Now it's like, okay, there's this family allegiance here, and then there's this allegiance with God. There's our family of origin, and then there's the family of God. And as we explore that, there are different times and different ways that it really rises to the surface, and we make those decisions, and then it's really an identity piece. This whole thing about purpose, it comes down to who am I? What is this life all about? What am I here for? I can answer some of these for you. You are a child of God, holy and dearly loved, created in his image to be in a relationship with him both now and forevermore. And he has made a glorious, wonderful way for that to happen for everyone, no matter who you are or what you've done or what's been done to you. He sent his son, Jesus, to come and take all of our imperfection inside of him, the things we've done that were contrary to who God is, and the things that were done to us that are contrary to who God is and what he desires. And Jesus put them to death in his body, and they were buried with him in the tomb. And on the third day, he rose again, and that sin, that imperfection, it stayed dead and buried in the dirt, and Jesus rose again so that now we have freedom and we have life and new life, and it's a full life, an abundant life in him. He's an incredible way, and through Jesus now, all of us can be adopted sons and daughters, a part of God's family. And remember, in God's family, there's no second-class citizens. When you're in God's family, you're in. And when you're in all the way. And when you're in, he's got a place for you. And he's got a calling for you. And he's got life for you, both eternally, but that eternal life starts right now in this present age. Every day that we live as a child of God on this earth with this new identity that we have in him, where our allegiance is to him first and foremost. And this doing what is right, when he shows us what is right and the integrity that involves, there is cost in that. But every one of those things that we do out of our allegiance and devotion to him that is right in him, it brings heaven to earth. It brings glimpses of God and who he is into our world, into our families and neighborhoods and our communities and workplaces and schools. And yet there is cost. And the dynamics change in our lives. And so the question that I believe we all wrestle with is, am I going to do what God's calling me to do? And there's things like being baptized, for instance. Sometimes people are like, hey, why should I be baptized? And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Because Jesus did it and Jesus told us to do it. And they're like, yeah, but I mean, you can yell but all day long, and I'll listen, but I'm not going to give you any other rebuttals. I'm only going to give you these two things. Jesus did it, and Jesus told us to do it. And so it just stands to reason, if you want to follow Jesus, and now you know that he did this, and he told us to do it, If you need more than that, I mean, it's okay. You can explore that and wrestle with it. I'm not being judgy. I'm just saying, like, I don't have anything else. Like, I'm going to follow Jesus, so I probably want to do what he did and what he told me to do. But I understand there's some dynamics there. Maybe you were sprinkled as an infant. Maybe you were sprinkled at a time when you made a decision to follow Jesus. Maybe you were brought up in a certain way where you experienced certain things. And then the word baptism was used for that. Like, hey, man, like, those are great things, by the way. I don't think they're bad things, just to be clear. They're great things that can always point us, but like if like your family was doing that because they wanted you to follow Jesus, and then you find out that Jesus did this and said this, you find out what's right, then let's do what's right. The best way to honor your family and what they've done anyway would be to follow Jesus, whether they agreed with it or not. How we handle money. I'm planning on hitting all the touchy subjects, by the way. But for like how we handle it, what we do with it, do we trust God with it? Whoa, I mean, I guarantee you've got some family baggage on the financial front. The way we engage relationally with other people. These things are there and they're present, but we have the opportunity to find out what's right. And the life that God gives us, and I would just remind you too that, and this is a great thing to know about God, God has proven his love for you. He loves you. He is madly, passionately head over heels in love with you. He is for you, not against you. He has demonstrated his love for you in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ Jesus came and died for us. It wasn't like we got our act together and we cleaned up and he's lucky to have us. This deal comes where he looks at us and says, I'm coming for you. And he comes for us. He has proven his love for us, that while we were still sinners, Christ Jesus died for us. And so his commands are not against you. They're for you. I know that can be tough to understand sometimes. Because we can look at his commands and be like, well, that's going to ruin my life. No. He is good. And he is love. And his commands are meant to bring blessing, not burden. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened. And he says, I will give you rest. Blessings, happiness. He says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But Jesus says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. A full life, an abundant life in him. And so as we celebrate and remember what God has done for us, and we respond to him, is there something that you know is right, that God has laid on your heart, that it's time to do? In this time of communion with him, would you just ask him those questions? God, is there something that you're showing me is right, that it's time to do? As we have communion together, we remember and celebrate God's love for us expressed through his son, Jesus. When we take the bread, we remember this covenant, this promise, like David and Jonathan made for each other, to be for each other, a covenant promise that Jesus makes with us, that he's got us. But when we say yes to him, we're saying we're with you. And so you're invited to take the bread, and just like Jesus did, he broke it and offered it to his friends, and he said, take, eat, all of you, remembering what he's done for you. He has made a way. Let's eat together. And Jesus also took the cup, and he made this beautiful proposal where he offered it to them, and he said, if you drink from this cup, you're saying yes for what I'm doing to you. You're uniting yourself with me. And when we unite ourselves to Jesus, we're uniting ourselves to a risen King, the King of Kings. So if you're saying yes to Jesus, we drink to the King. I hope you'll spend a few moments listening to Jesus right now as we just ask him, God, show us what is right and what you want us to do.